Bring up palm oil in any room, and man, the room just splits instantly. It is wild. On one side, you've got folks who will argue passionately that it's literally the ultimate environmental villain, responsible for just erasing some of our planet's most precious and ancient forests. But then, on the exact opposite side, you have people who see it as the absolute economic savior of Southeast Asia, an industry that is single-handedly listing entire nations out of extreme poverty. And you know what the truly fascinating part of all this is? Both of those perspectives are actually grounded in very real, very valid facts. There's no fake news here on either side. So welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to bypass all the internet shouting and take a really close look at the complex, deeply nuanced data behind the world's most controversial resource. So let's dive right into this with the most obvious question. It's the one you see all the time on internet forums, in the comment sections, and plastered across social media campaigns. Why can't the world just quit palm oil? I mean, it sounds like a beautifully simple solution, right? Just stop buying it, stop using it, problem solved. But the reality of why we simply can't let it go stretches so far beyond the common assumption that it's just because it's a cheap ingredient. Yes, it's incredibly cost-effective, but honestly, that is barely the tip of the iceberg. To truly understand our global addiction to this stuff, you have to look at the biology and the sheer, staggering efficiency of the plant itself.
And that brings us to the super efficient secret of palm oil.
If you think of standard, everyday crops like soybean or sunflower as your reliable, everyday family sedans, well, palm oil is the heavy-duty turbo diesel truck of the agricultural world. It does the heavy lifting. The math on its yield efficiency is absolutely mind-blowing. Let's put this into perspective. To get the exact same amount of oil from soybeans that you'd get from a palm crop, you would need roughly 8 times more land. Let that sink in for a second. 8 times the physical space. Sunflower, that requires about 6 times more land. Rapeseed needs about 5 times more. This right here illustrates the absolute core of our global dilemma. The world is obsessed with palm oil because it produces a massive, unprecedented amount of product on a relatively tiny, hyper-efficient footprint. Now, because of that incredible land efficiency, combined with some really unique physical properties, like the fact that it's incredibly stable on a shelf, it has a wonderfully high melting point, and it provides this perfectly smooth texture, palm oil has basically taken over the consumer market. It is secretly sitting in roughly 50% of all modern supermarket foods and cosmetics. 50%! Half of literally everything you see on the shelves. We're talking instant noodles, lipstick, ice cream, margarine, chocolate bars, laundry detergent, and even biofuel for your car. It is the invisible engine that is actively powering the modern global supply chain.
And the reason you might not realize you're consuming it or using it every single day is because, frankly, it loves to hide. You aren't always going to see the words palm oil listed clearly on the back of your shampoo bottle or your favorite biscuit wrapper. Instead, you're going to see names like stearic acid, or sodium palmate, or glycerin, plus hundreds of other complex chemical derivatives that sound like they belong in a lab. The pacing of our consumption is just relentless. We use it from the moment we brush our teeth in the morning to the moment we wash our faces at night, almost entirely unaware of its sheer ubiquity in our lives.
But of course, there is a very dark side to this miracle crop. Let's talk about what happens when greed takes over. Because palm oil is so incredibly lucrative and so universally demanded, high global prices have historically triggered this reckless, gold rush-style scramble for land. And when expansion is driven by unregulated greed rather than careful, scientific planning, the results are nothing short of catastrophic. We have all seen the heartbreaking footage: primary forests, ancient ecosystems just burned to the ground, crucial wildlife habitats completely lost, with iconic, beautiful species like the orangutan becoming the tragic face of this environmental crisis. And then there's the massive regional haze, thick, toxic smoke from these land-clearing fires that literally chokes neighboring countries for weeks at a time. These aren't just abstract ideas or internet talking points. This is real, devastating environmental damage happening on a massive scale. But when we actually look at the science, it reveals a really deep nuance that often gets lost in the outrage. It's almost all about geography. Notice the stark contrast in outcomes based purely on where the farmer decides to plant the crop. If cultivated on proper, non-peat soil with solid management practices, palm oil's carbon footprint is actually quite low. In fact, it's sometimes lower than those alternative vegetable oils we talked about earlier. But if you make a single wrong move and expand the plantation into peatlands, which are essentially these massive, swampy, underground carbon sinks, you trigger explosive carbon emissions. Draining these peatlands to make way for agriculture releases centuries of stored carbon straight up into the atmosphere, causing a brutal ecological disaster. So the plant itself isn't inherently evil, right? The damage is entirely dictated by where we humans choose to plant it. The intense nuance of this whole situation is perfectly summarized by this really powerful analogy. Palm oil is like nuclear energy. It can power a city or it can cause a tragedy. It is an absolute anti-hero. It's an incredibly potent, highly efficient tool that does its job better than almost anything else. But if it's mismanaged, if it's placed in the wrong hands or shoved into the wrong ecosystem, that very same miraculous tool mutates into an unstoppable monster. Which brings us to the human element. Palm oil is very much a double-edged economic sword. To truly understand this global debate, we absolutely have to look at the reality on the ground in Southeast Asia. This industry isn't just a corporate ecological statistic on a spreadsheet. It literally supports millions of livelihoods. Entire villages, millions upon millions of families, survive entirely on the ecosystem of palm oil. The income generated from this crop funds local schools, it supports the neighborhood food stalls where the plantation workers eat every day, it funds regional transport services, small-town factories, and massive, bustling shipping ports. From the perspective of locals living in Indonesia and Malaysia, Western boycott campaigns often feel deeply hypocritical. They rightly point out that developed nations cleared their own forests centuries ago to build strong, modernized economies, yet now those same developed nations are demanding that developing countries abandon the very crop that puts food on their tables. It's a massive clash of perspectives. So what happens if the boycotts win? Let's explore the danger of erasing palm oil. What actually happens if we listen to the fiercest critics and implement an overnight total ban? Let's just walk through the logical chain of events here step by step. Step 1. We implement a global ban on palm oil. Everyone celebrates, right? The forests are saved. But wait, then we get to step 2. 8 billion people on Earth still need vegetable oil for their daily food, their soap, their cosmetics. We didn't stop needing oil, so the world's massive demand instantly shifts over to alternatives like soy or sunflower. And now we hit step 3. Because we already know that soy requires 8 times more land to produce the exact same amount of oil, farmers in places like South America and Eastern Europe would literally have to bulldoze and destroy vast new natural habitats just to keep up with the demand. Banning palm oil doesn't actually save the world's forests. It just exports the problem and multiplies the deforestation to other continents. So, as a global society, we are left trapped between 2 completely disastrous extremes. On one hand, a total global ban leads to spiking prices for basic everyday necessities, a truly catastrophic global land loss due to inefficient replacement crops, and absolute economic ruin for millions of hardworking people in the developing world. But then, on the other extreme, allowing unregulated Wild West-style growth means we lose our irreplaceable tropical forests, precious wildlife goes extinct, and carbon emissions spiral completely out of control. It becomes incredibly clear that neither of these extreme scenarios is a viable, safe, or realistic option for the future of our planet. So we have to find a better way. We have to find the sane middle ground. Since the modern world's massive appetite makes quitting practically impossible without causing an even worse ecological disaster, we just have to learn how to manage it responsibly. And thankfully, the global focus is shifting heavily toward real-world, pragmatic solutions to fix this broken industry. For instance, we're seeing a massive push for rigorous sustainable palm oil certification, like the RSPO, which ensures that massive corporate buyers only purchase from responsible sources. We're seeing strict government bans finally being placed on peatland clearing to prevent those massive carbon bombs from going off. We're also utilizing modern replanting techniques with scientifically improved seeds to maximize the yield on land that has already been cleared, so we don't need to cut down any more trees. Add in innovative waste utilization technologies and a demand for totally transparent, traceable supply chains, and you have a roadmap forward. The goal has to be rigorous sustainability, not impossible eradication. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Palm oil is neither the pure, flawless savior its biggest advocates claim it is, nor is it the one-dimensional evil monster its critics portray. The reality is, it is an unstoppable, super efficient economic machine that we are completely reliant upon. The question for our generation is no longer about erasing it. The real question we all have to face is, how do we make palm oil sane?